Give us a sense of how much business has returned with, well, a lot of the economies in this part of the world opening up.
To be honest, Haslinda, it's pretty limited, except for China, and maybe we'll come back to that in a moment. But the rest of Asia, whilst people are moving around, and here in Singapore, we certainly have more freedom in terms of what we can do on a day-to-day basis. But like here, staycations still aren't available. But in Seoul and Vietnam, we've gotten a bit of a bump. And in Australia, things were starting to come to life with some movement and some increase in occupancies. But with the recent lockdown in Victoria, that's going to put a hit on the business in Australia as well. So it's pretty limited, that's for sure. So I'd like to get excited, but it's certainly too early for that.
So give us a sense of the occupancy rate that you're seeing.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, honestly, it's still outside of China. We're talking in the teens and in the 20s at best, because the only business that's coming back is leisure travel. Most people, when they think of our hotels, which is great, they think of travel for holiday. But the biggest part of our business is corporate travel, whether it's pure business, whether it's meetings and incentives, government business. That's more than 60% of our business, and that hasn't really started up anywhere outside of China yet.
You talked about the efforts to promote staycation in Singapore, but that $20 billion gap is still unfilled. Give us a sense of what kind of recovery you're looking at.
In Singapore, I mean, Singapore will be one of the worst impacted markets. That by definition, 90% of the business that comes to Singapore comes from outside of the city itself. So once staycations become available, which we're expecting in the next week or two, there'll probably be a bit of a surge in the short term, but in the medium to long term, that's not going to fill our hotels, not even close. And even and it varies around the region in terms of the size of the domestic market. So countries like China, India, Indonesia, Australia, the domestic market is by far and away the largest part of our business. But in other countries like, of course, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, the international cross-border travel is much more important for the hotels.
And Michael, tell us a bit more about the China reopening. Is this the right template then that you can apply on how you're going to reopen other hotels in different markets? What are you seeing in terms of green shoots in the mainland now?
China has definitely improved significantly. I mean, at the bottom of the pandemic, which in China was February, we were at 7% occupancy, and each month has gotten better and better. Last month, we were on track to finish at about 42%, but then, in the middle of the month, there was the breakout in Beijing, and the impact was immediately. So we lost about 6 points in occupancy and up to 42%. And that's for our premium and luxury hotels. Actually, our economy and mid-scale hotels finished the month at 61%. This month, already we're tracking back to slightly above what we were anticipating in China last month. So we should be around 42, 44% for our luxury and premium hotels, and our economy and mid-scale should be back up around 65% this month, which is pretty encouraging. And that's what we hope to see in other parts of the world as the economies loosen up. But the reactivity to spikes of the virus are quick, and they are severe.
And back in April, your CEO mentioned about the layoffs of 220,000 employees worldwide, and he vowed to rehire every single one of them. What's the update right now? How many of those employees here in the region are back on the payroll?
Well, look, in Asia Pacific, we have almost 140,000 people that do work in our hotels. And again, it varies around the region in terms of the way governments have supported the industries in terms of stand downs and support. In China, again, leading the way, we're back up to about 80% reemployment of the people that were with us pre-pandemic, and hopefully, by Q4 we should be back to full employment in China. Now, the rest of the region really depends on what happens with the virus. And it will take longer, particularly in countries like Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, where there's more international business. So, though in Singapore, the government has been very generous with the support. So we've been able to keep a lot bigger part of our workforce employed during the pandemic.
Michael, countries are beginning to talk about travel bubbles. What are you hearing?
Look, I mean, so far it's a very thin lane, the green lane. The first one that we have is between Singapore and China, and you really need to have to travel. And first, you have to apply. You have to be approved. You have to be tested before you get onto the plane. Tested when you get off the plane. Quarantine for 24 to 48 hours to make sure that you have a negative test. You can't move within China for another 14 days outside of the city you arrive. And then upon your return to Singapore, you have to quarantine for another 14 days. So it really is for essential travel. But the most important thing is governments are working on it. They're all talking about it, Thailand as well, Australia. There's a lane between Korea and China. But at the moment, it's a trickle. Now, that will improve, but it's going to take time. And it is that inter-country travel that's most important. And also getting corporate business traveling again, also, it is vital to our success.
And Michael, you guys do, of course, have a strong balance sheet. I'm just wondering, there's lots of hotels for sale right now. Would you be considering at this point to add to your portfolio?
Well, don't forget, we are what we refer to as an asset-light company. So, in fact, we divested almost all of our real estate 2 years ago. So we're not in the business of owning hotels, and there will be some good opportunities around, but that's where we'll work with our owners to see if they want to purchase more hotels and get us to operate them. And we do see that happening. It's still relatively early days. There hasn't been a lot of movements. A lot of the banks have been different to in the GFC, working with owners to make sure that they can get through the pandemic. So it's a very, we've never experienced a situation like this. Well, we've never had business worse for so long. Government, industry, banks are all working together to find our way through in the best way possible.